a few more moments for the rest of our audience to show up. So we appreciate your patience, and we'll get started in just one moment. Those of you who are joining us, we're just pausing for just a moment longer for the rest of the audience to show up. Thank you for your patience. So Gwen, what do you think at this point?
There's only about 15 representatives from the agencies on so far.
All right. Well, I think in order for us to stay on schedule, we should probably go ahead and kick it off here. We do have a limitation of an hour, so I will kick it off. Good morning, everybody. My name is John Wright. I am the program liaison from One Washington to the Agency Point of Contact Network. I've had the privilege of getting to know many of you over the last 18 months. Of course, there was a time when we were kind of doing the just the buckshot broadcast approach to communications, and we've tightened that up over the last 18 months with the Point of Contact Network. It's funny because the thing that I hear oftentimes is how many agencies are impacted by One Washington? And the answer is, it depends. And the small agency customers of DES are really the crux of the matter when it comes to an answer, because some of you all buy finance services, some buy HR or budget services, but nobody buys everything. So it just depends. So it's been great to get to know all of you. This morning, we are joined by Gwen McClanahan from the Department of Enterprise Services. You all know Gwen, and she is going to provide a greeting for us this morning. So Gwen, welcome to you.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I want to welcome everybody to the session. For our small agency customers, DES is very proud to support you in the One Washington implementation activities. Also joining us online from DES Finance, your support team, are Diane Llewellyn, Chad Johnson, Paul Bitar, and Seth Flory from DES Budget. We also have Sarah Parker from DES Accounts Payable and Don Clowers from DES Revenue Management. As you will hear today, One Washington continues to achieve important milestones as we get closer to implementation of Phase 1A. One of the key themes you'll hear today that's of importance is agency readiness and the steps necessary for people, processes, and technology readiness so that we all can be prepared for the changes that are coming our way. So even though budget and accounting activities are handled by DES on your behalf, you will still be interested to hear what's going on. Also, budget might be high on your priority list of interests, so they will cover that today also. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Like I said, it's been great to even get to be able to partner with you. You have been a powerhouse of collaboration and productivity and engagement. So I feel great knowing that you're there and that your portfolio manager's there and your customers are going to be well served as we go through this. So if we can go ahead and flip the slide, just a couple of housekeeping details as you can get a sneak peek at the agenda there. First of all, we are recording this session and we will post a link via email to you within the next 24 hours, hopefully, with the recorded session as well as a backup copy of the deck. You should have received a copy of the deck from me this morning. In case you happen to fall off of the screen share mode, you could still have a copy on your desktop there. And with that, this morning, then we roll into the program update. And next, I'd like to introduce our program director, Matthew Meacham. Matthew.
Great, thanks, John. So if we could just go ahead and go to the next slide here, I will run down a couple of things that I want to make this audience aware of. Again, my name is Matthew Meacham. I am the program director here at One Washington. I have been in this role for about 1.5 years. And I am excited about One Washington and what it means for the amount of transparency that we're going to be able to bring to the state's finances and our back office function, as well as the increased fidelity of the data that we will have access to in the future. I'm excited about the improvement in daily lives for staff. Think about how much time we all put into compiling spreadsheets and going to this system and that system to pull out different pieces of information. We pull it all together over a couple of weeks and then we give it to a decision maker and it's outdated. That is what I'm excited about changing around when we get this new enterprise resource planning tool into place. And so I just wanted to take a little bit of time to kind of talk big picture about what's going on with scope, schedule, and budget. I apologize for those of you who have seen some of these slides. We use these in a variety of forums, but they are the slides that help tell the story the best in terms of the feedback that we've received from different audiences. So just bear with me while we walk through a little bit of this. So for those that don't know, the One Washington program, which is a business transformation effort, it is about more than just replacing systems. It is about changing how we do business. It's about changing, going from mainframe systems to going to the cloud and starting to rewrite a lot of our business processes, changing how we do HR, changing how we do some of the finance around the state here. This began back in 2014. Kicked it off. There was a number of different work efforts that happened in the preceding 6 years to lead us to where we're at today. And when we talk about an enterprise resource planning tool or an ERP, that includes kind of 4 main components. The first is the finance side of things, also procurement systems, and then budget functionality, how we allocate our dollars, where it all goes, and then the HR and payroll function and what we do with our HRMS system of today. So when you think about the financial side of things, when we're talking about the scope of just how large this is going to be and how transformational it's going to be, whose cheese are we moving at the end of the day? There are over 35,000 businesses and over 75,000 people that rely on AFERS payments today. And when you think about that, just the impact out there into our economy, into our state, that is huge. There's over $4 billion with a B dollars that go through that system per month. So that gives you a sense of just how much this is going to impact people on a daily basis. When we talk about our procurement systems today there is no centralized procurement system for this state. You might say, well, why is that a big deal? Does that really matter? Don't individual agencies have their own things that they can use? Well, some of them do. And the challenge with that is that we're not able to go to one tool, one system to say, hey, how much are we spending on different goods and services? And with an entity as large as the state of Washington, we have over 65,000 employees here, and you see the amount of money that comes through the state. We have a lot of purchasing power. And it would be helpful to be able to go to different vendors and say, wait a minute, this is how much we pay here as a state, all of our agencies rolled up together. Why don't you give us a better deal? Why aren't we getting a massive discount for the amount of business that we do with your company? And so not having that ability to look into our true purchasing power costs us. And that costs citizens, and that every dollar that we overspend on, that is a dollar that could go to serving some of our missions, whether that's protecting forests, or cleaning up Puget Sound, or better roads in Eastern Washington, or better services for kids in the foster care system. That's what's at stake here. And then when you talk about our budget, we have over a $100 billion capital operating and transportation budget. You add all that up together, and when you think about what we had when we first got started with AFERS, the state's budget was down around $8 billion. And so we've grown quite a bit as a state, and we need modern tools to be able to manage that work. And if we think about just where we're at today with this COVID situation, and all of that, we need modern tools that exist out there on the cloud in order to be able to access them when we need to, from where we need to be able to. And when you think about how important government is in these types of situations where there's a lot of disruption and supply chains aren't working and all of this kind of stuff, folks are out of work, folks look to government to be able to provide services. And whether it's COVID, whether it's earthquakes, whether it's wildfires, there's many different disruptions that will be happening over the coming years, where we need to be able to provide the best possible service to people. And for all of this, these services totaling over $100 billion can get out there into people's hands. And then the last piece here is the HR and payroll system. We've had SAP here since 2006. We have over 500 separate customizations with that system. That's a good thing in the sense that we're able to still do our work today. That's good. But it also means that it's a very challenging system to deal with. So when there's a new collective bargaining agreement that goes into place, or there's unique rules that we need to abide by for things like the CARES Act and things along those lines, it's very challenging to pivot on a dime. And a modern system will help us with that. If we can go to the next slide. So this is a high-level roadmap of what's ahead of us for the next several years. And what I want to draw your attention to right now is that light blue line there called Phase 0 ERP Readiness. If you have your screen maximized, you should be able to see it. And that is where we are at right now. We are in this phase of this project where we are getting prepared for acquiring the service, the actual tool that we will use, and getting ready for what's called a systems integrator. This would be a large consulting firm. You all have probably worked with the firms, the famous firm, the big American firms that are out there that do this kind of work. They come in and work with us to get this kind of service set up. and get us ready for a go live, which will happen in, you see that first star down there along the bottom timeline. We go live in July of 2022. But right now we're in the readiness phase. So this is about us working with agencies in the budget instructions, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. There's some greater detail about what we're going to need from agencies so that we can provide good services to you all to get ready. But what's first right after that readiness phase, when we kick off phase 1A, which is called core financials, and what that really means, what that really translates into is replacing AFRS. AFRS is technology that really comes from the 60s. If you're familiar with the COBOL programming language that comes out of the 1960s, we've had AFRS since the early 80s. And we need to replace it. It's getting more and more expensive to find folks that work in that coding language, and the folks that we do have, the subject matter experts that have spent 20 or more years working on that system, they're starting to get ready. They're not going to be working forever. They're getting ready to retire and move on to the next phase of their life. So what we have here is we're going to start with that. Get AFRS ready to go. There's about an 18-month implementation timeline that kicks off in January of next year to get us ready for that July of 2022 go live. And then you see a little bit of overlap with what's called phase 1B. That's what we're calling expanded financials and procurement. That's where we will do some additional work with things like projects, grants, and to get ready for a changeover of replacing the Washington State Department of Transportation's TRAINS system. That is their financial system that they use today. That system is going to be going away in 2023, so we need to replace AFRS ahead of that and then give ourselves some time to get ready for bringing DOT onto the new system as well. While that's going on, we will have stood up our maintenance and operation shop, which you see there in the long gray bar, and that's where everybody across the state, or those that have adopted the new technology, will start to get service from there. When you have a question about how a business process works, or how do I work with the system, that's who you'd be calling and working with. And then after that, we would move to phase 2, which is going to be HR and payroll. That's out in a subsequent biennium, 23-25, and then budget would be after that. So it kind of builds on each other. And the reason for that is not only do we have to recognize the fiscal situation that the state's in, but these undertakings are very large and complex. And it's not something that you just do all at once, not with an organization that's got 65,000 people in it. And when we look to what the University of Washington as well as Washington State are doing right now, they are adopting one of these tools for their campuses, and it is a years-long effort for them as well. And so we've been working closely with them to understand some of their lessons learned. All this to say that by the time we get out there to 2025, that's when we would be going live with a new HR and payroll system. And what that would look like for you as a user would be the ability to do things on your phone, to do things remotely, not have to submit paper requests for HR actions and things along those lines. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Thanks. And so this is a little bit more detailed slide, kind of a takeaway for you if you want to take a look at what are the different functions that would be happening and when those would be happening. The previous slide was about showing you kind of the big picture. This is the further breakdown of that. And so when we talk about what's going on in system readiness, this is about getting agencies ready. This is about us looking at our chart of accounts. This is about us looking at some of our business processes. And then phase 1A, when we start to do that AFRS replacement, some of the details in here. So then if we can just go ahead to the next slide. This slide right here, we've gotten a lot of feedback that this is very helpful for people to understand, well, I know what system I use today. What am I going to be using in the future? When does my current system, when does it kind of run out? When am I going to actually start to feel this change happening? And if you see there at the top, we've got some legacy systems that are going to keep going on for a while, and then we're going to start transitioning in that July of 2022 period to the new system. And so things that are on deck first, obviously AFRS, the chart of accounts, different budget controls, AR, accounts receivable, all of that. We're going to be using our existing systems up until July, and then we're going to flip over to the new system. There's some things for probably not very many on this call for folks who deal with Medicaid and some of the cost allocation peculiarities that are out there. That will also get touched, but it probably doesn't impact you and your missions and your agencies. After that, then we start looking at some of the blue systems that are out there, so projects, grants, your travel systems. That will be in that phase 1B, as well as procurement systems, so things surrounding P cards, any vendor portals that are out there for folks, for vendors that use the state's systems for purchasing goods. That will be in phase 1B. And then down there in the darker blue, that's where we get to the things like replacing the state's HRMS system, our payroll system, and things along those lines. So this kind of gives you a sense of what's coming next over the coming years. And I do just want to clarify, because we get asked this question quite a bit. Hey, with the COVID situation and the state's budget situation, is this thing really going to happen? Are we still going? And the answer is yes, we are. The legislature has been crystal clear that they understand the challenges with aging IT infrastructure and the need to head to the cloud to get better functionality and to be more efficient with the resources that we have. When we look at what other entities have done that have adopted one of these tools, it is so much more efficient. Staff are freed up to focus on analyzing data as opposed to just trying to go and grab it, trying to go collect it and pull it together for people. So we're still moving forward, and we're going to have a decision package that will be in front of the legislature for the 21-23 biennium that will allow us to pay for our services, for the subscription that we're going to buy, and all of that. So I just wanted to hopefully give you a kind of a high level before we start diving into the details here. And if anybody has any questions in the chat, I'd be happy to answer them. Doesn't look like we've got one right now.
Yes.
Okay. So with that, I will turn it back over to John.
Thank you, Matthew. So yes, audience, we are monitoring the chat log. So if you do have questions, feel free to ping us there in the chat. Also, just a quick reminder, if you could, and check to make sure that you are muted. That'll help the overall call quality. And then as we roll into communications, I just want to call out what a great advocate you have as small agency customers of DES with Gwen McClanahan. So this presentation is a great example of the balance, trying to find out what do the small agency customers need to know, what will be of interest, what will be of value, versus all the things that are not of interest, right? And Gwen put it to me so succinctly recently. She said, you know, the challenge for One Washington is all the things it has to think about versus all the things we don't care about. I was crying for a half an hour. That was just really caught me. It was perfect. And so we do try to work to give you the information that you need so that you at least know what's going on in the world around you, even though the majority of DES small agency customers aren't necessarily impacted directly. So with that, just a little bit of humor, we'll move on to the next slide. And Gwen, as the advocate for the small agency customers, I will let you speak to this one.
All right, thanks. Hello again, everybody. This slide basically covers what you can expect pertaining to who's doing what, where communications are going to come from. So each agency is a little different. We provide different services to you. There are some agencies that use our budget services, our accounting services, our payroll services. There are some that only use budget or only use accounts payable or only use payroll. So there's lots of hybrids. But there's a link on this slide that has a chart that shows where we support you versus those activities that you do in-house. For those agencies where we do support you in budget or accounting, you know, you can count on us. We're going to be the point of contact. We're going to coordinate, respond, help you with preparing for One Washington in your budget and your accounting areas. We'll keep you updated on how the program's how implementation's going. You don't have to participate in any of the major activities because we're doing that for you. There will be monthly point of contact meetings that you'll be responsible to attend, but otherwise communications pertaining to those services that we do for you will come to you through DES. For those activities that you do in-house, you do your own budget, you do your own accounting, you'll hear directly from One Washington, and you will need to participate in the One Washington activities directly. So if you have any questions about that, please let us know. Otherwise, I will pass it back to John.
Thank you, Gwen. And it is a question that I have received from a couple of the DES small agency customers, and that is, are you guys thinking about the things that we want to know about versus what we don't know about? And the answer is yes. And so that's the summary of what Gwen is presenting there, is that we do work very closely in partnership with Gwen and team, so that A, we have a general sense of what's important and meaningful to you, but also so that we're coordinating so that DES can be the primary voice and the primary advocate, as well as the primary impact zone for most of the activities. So it is on our minds. We're trying to be mindful of it. And if you do have ideas or suggestions on things we could do to get better and improve, we welcome your feedback, and we'll post the email address here in just a moment if you're not familiar with it already. So moving on then to the agency support team, this is just a heads up of a thing that we're thinking. So those of you, first of all, the points of contact network is made up of a variety of individuals, even amongst the smalls. Some of you have been with the One Washington effort or associated with it for over 18 months, possibly even 2 to 3 years. Other individuals from the Smalls Network are newer to their agency and new-ish also to One Washington. So we try to modulate the kind of information that we're providing based on that spectrum. But also, those of you that have been with us for a while know that we used to take the buckshot approach to communications, and we were blasting out there to any email address that we had in hopes that somebody would get it. And then we formalized with the points of contact network about 16 or 17 months ago, so that there could be a more organized approach to communicating with you. And in your role, you've had the responsibility to receive all inbound communications, coordinate agency responses, oversee tasks that had deliverables and due dates associated with them and that kind of thing. It was still rather loosely knit together, however. And so one of the things that we're looking toward as we approach the implementation timeline that Matthew was sharing on the timeline later this fall is how to strengthen and mature this network. In particular, one of the things that we're thinking about is how to more effectively have the agency sponsor. In most of your cases, as small agencies, it'll probably be the deputy or if not the exec director of the agency, because you don't have that many people, right? So, and we get that, but what needs to happen is we're looking for more effective communication going up in addition to down in the silo for communications. And it's all about accountability and results, and we really need for agency executives to be more involved in the picture. So going ahead, a thing that we're thinking about and that you'll hear more about in the months ahead is how a potential restructure of the points of contact network might look like. Now, in your cases, again, one of the things that may not be true is that as we focus on the finance function first, some of you are the finance / budget / procurement / payroll person for your agency. That's great. You're already in position. But where a finance person connected into the POC network, that's something that we'll also be looking at. So just a heads up, no changes today whatsoever. As just as we function today, keep on keeping on. That's how we'll do it, and we will provide a heads up in over the next weeks and months as we make this journey together. Any questions about that so far? So we're kind of at a segue here. Again, we're trying to find the balance between what you want to know versus what you need to know. So at this point, we are going to transition into a overview of how the state biennial budget conversation is working. And then that will be followed up by a small section on technical readiness for some select agencies. So if you're interested at all in how agencies around you are responding to the budget instructions that are out right now from OFM, you're more than welcome to stay, especially if you're one of the 5 agencies that is impacted by One Washington, because you have systems and you are specifically Department of Services for the Blind, the Lottery Commission, the State Conservation Commission, the Transportation Improvement Board, or the Traffic Safety Commission, then we especially invite you to linger. And if I could just right quick do a sound check. How's my sound coming through? Do I still have sound? 1, 2, 3, good, okay. I was getting a note on my side that there was some kind of issue. So for those of you who do want to continue on, then we will roll right into a budget overview, and I'm going to introduce Brianna Samuela. She is the budget manager for One Washington, and Brianna, welcome to the POC Network session.
Good morning, thanks, John. So for those of you that have had the opportunity to review budget instructions that were released by OFM last week, you'll see that for One Washington, we are for agencies focusing on technical resource needs for impacted finance systems that will need to be modified to interface with the new ERP system that will go live next biennium. That being said, the program's working to coordinate our request for FTEs, contractors, like OCM, that'll help support all agencies for this endeavor. And again, the focus for agencies are technical resources. And then from this slide, you can see the basis of the technical resources, the starting point for all agencies is the system and data inventory that was completed in the spring by the One Washington tech team. They had reached out to all agencies and requested that agencies report information related to systems that would be impacted by the ERP. So not all systems, just ones that would be impacted by the ERP. So finance, HR, payroll, that type of thing. And from that, they heard back from 44 agencies that would have impacts. But then if you carve that down a little bit more, since the focus for next biennium is AFRS replacement and finance, you come up with 15 agencies that we determined were eligible to submit requests for technical resources. So again, that doesn't apply to most of the agencies on the line, but there is, if you're one of the 44, but not one of the 15, there is an exception process, and there's a One Washington budget resource page that you can review. There is a process where if you do believe you missed a mission critical system or something significant that needs to be addressed in order to interact with the new ERP system, you can go through this process where there's a list of criteria of what applies and what doesn't. You fill out the form that just to provide additional information to the One Washington tech team, and they'll review that and then make a determination of whether or not you would need to submit a budget request. And then if we could skip to the next slide, please. So this is the timeline that we've laid out for agencies of when to submit what. So the kickoff meetings for budget development are this week. The 15 agencies met on Monday, and then the other agencies, 29 that weren't immediately eligible to submit a request, are meeting this afternoon. So those invites were sent to agency POCs. And then from there, we'll be hosting a series of budget workshops to work through agencies' technical resource needs during 3 weeks in July. And another important date, I think, for this group is July 10th is the last day to submit the budget exception request form. And that just goes to the One Washington mailbox. And again, the tech team will review that and then contact agencies directly. And then we are anticipating that all agencies will have all of their budget requests submitted back to One Washington by August 15th. So then we can do an internal review process and consolidate all the information with One Washington's request as well into one decision package. and then submit that to OFM budget to be considered for inclusion in the governor's budget. So again, please, if you have the time, take the opportunity to look at the One Washington budget resource page. It's linked on the One Washington page. There's a ton of information on there, and if you have any questions, please reach out to myself or to the One Washington mailbox. So that is all I have. I'll pause though for questions if anybody has any. If not, then I'll hand it over to Jennifer to talk about readiness activities. Okay.
Thank you so much, Brianna. And I'll just reiterate what she said. We have a lot of great resources. If you have questions about budget instructions.
Okay, so next I would like to.
So I know John's trying to introduce me and he sounds like a robot. Does he sound like a robot to everyone else? He's entered the matrix.
Yes.
He can't come out. He took the red pill.
You go for it, Jennifer.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Again, thank you to Brianna. Lots of information out on the OFM website regarding the budget instructions specific to One Washington. Shifting now a little bit to some of the other agency readiness activities. When we talk about agency readiness, what we're referring to are three essentially categories or areas of agency readiness, and that's inclusive of people, process, and technology. All three of those working together is how we're going to look at and be thinking about from how to most effectively prepare for One Washington. So when Matthew was going through all of the components of the One Washington timeline, all the different phases, each of those phases we want to be working with you on how you can prepare as agencies in each of these areas. So I'm going to review a couple of the upcoming activities more to just give you some advance notice. Not all of them necessarily will apply to each of you, but at least, wanting to share, here are the areas and activities we're thinking about from a One Washington perspective. Before we get to those specific details, wanting to also share, that next level of detail regarding agency readiness and some of those key milestones that are a part of agency readiness. So you'll notice where we are today, obviously, and then we have similar red flag milestones showing in some cases some of the same milestones that both Brianna and Matthew spoke about. We're working on a data management and integration readiness plan, and certainly that very much relates to the budget instructions and the impacts that agencies may have to manage specifically from a technology perspective. And then we already talked about the software vendor selection and the budget requests. Moving to the second half of the timeline, these are a little bit more specific, at least the two that are the agency support team plan and the OCM capability plan. These are more specific from a people readiness perspective. As John mentioned about introducing the agency support team concept, we certainly want to make sure we outline the activities and the overall approach that we want to take. And part of that will be coming from feedback that we've collected and heard from all of you. And I'll talk about a survey in a couple of minutes where we want to continue to hear back from you. And then one of the areas that has been really important has been the organizational change management capability plan. And that's actually shown here on this slide in a little bit more detail from a timing perspective. So these agency readiness activities now are a little bit more focused over the next couple of months. They're still broken out in those three areas, as you can see. And I was just speaking about two of those people readiness activities, which are the two darker green lines. That OCM capability plan, and then that OCM AST or agency support team plan. So these will be activities that while One Washington will be developing them, it's certainly going to include activities that will help agencies, especially as you're looking at building OCM capability within your agencies. Very much recognize as a small agency, your employees, the people in your agencies have many roles and responsibilities. And while I know OCM is really important, and I believe all of you believe OCM is very important, we also recognize just time and availability is very difficult, not only before COVID-19 and all of the current budget challenges, but even more so now. So what we want to do is try and develop activities that will help agencies so that we can build some of that capability within specifically the area of organizational change management. And then there's a couple of other items that you see listed there, more so just to give you a highlight on the process and the technology piece. There will be some opportunities, whether it's through different forums or other meetings that will be coming up regarding the chart of accounts. And certainly for those agencies, those of you who have your own financial system, are not dependent on DES or do not get those services from DES. But also looking at what else, what other feedback we may need to be able to collect from you and follow up with you on the impact changing the chart of accounts will have on your agencies. And then there's a whole slew of activities at the bottom for technology. So I'm gonna not go into great detail here. It really will vary and depend on systems that you have in use and the impact or changes as a result of phase 1A and AFERS replacement. So all to say, there are activities that are in progress, that certainly work that has started well even before June, that it's going to continue into the rest of June, which is just a few more days, and over the rest of the summer. And with the current environment with furloughs and budget crunches, we very much want to be able to be proactive and share with you where your time is needed and even get more specific on what activities you may need to complete and what those deadlines are. Please know we have very much heard from you, and this is, thank you, Rob, very much relates to our next topic, which is the survey, that we do want to hear back from you. We have heard clearly from agencies this week in various meetings of needing additional time because of furloughs. And we want to better understand what is the impact having on you and your agency so that we can work with you as much as possible from a One Washington perspective as we look at activities that do need to be completed for One Washington. So those POCs out there, you'll be receiving a survey from us, and we'll certainly work with Gwen as well on getting this out to our DES small agencies. And the intent is, again, looking at hopefully as short a survey as possible to make it easy, but also really wanting to understand, based on our current environment, how is that impacting you as you think about One Washington activities that may need to be completed, the level of support for One Washington. So we need to like to get an update from this area. We had this question on a survey we did back in November, December. So this is a nice checkpoint to see, are we improving or not in this area? And then we started very briefly to talk about some of the readiness activities and want to hear back from you on what else would be helpful regarding those readiness activities so that you know what is needed and when and how to most effectively complete those activities. So we'll be sending that out. We want to give you a couple of weeks to do that. I know next week with the holiday and then again with furloughs, it could be challenging. Hoping again to keep it as short as possible and know that your time would be very valued in hearing back from you. And this is one way to make sure we're collecting all of the information we need to. All right. So I know that was a lot of information from a couple of us. This is an opportunity where we wanted to hear from you, to be able to pause, see if you have any questions. So I think if we go ahead, Rob, to our next slide, either in the chat box at the very bottom of Zoom, in case you haven't used Zoom yet, you'll see the chat function. If you click on that, you can type in here a question or a comment, and then certainly welcome if you'd like to come off of mute to tell us if there's either a question that you have, or is there something specific that you feel like you do need from One Washington, which is our first question. It's very quiet. The other question that we are asking in regarding our next steps is, would it be helpful, again, knowing that your time is certainly very precious and you have many roles and responsibilities, would it be helpful to have a monthly meeting, a monthly check-in, to be able to share with you what's coming, anything new from a One Washington perspective? Would that be helpful? Okay. Well, it may be, thank you so much. We got one vote, so that's fantastic. So maybe once every other month, and that's a question back. So I think that is an option. And that's what we wanted to hear back from you, is what is going to be most effective and most beneficial. So I'll just give it a few more seconds to see if there's other comments you want to type into the chat or come off of mute to let us know if you need anything from One Washington, and then also how often or the frequency for us getting together and meeting. Okay, so maybe getting closer together as time goes on. Thank you very much. And then we will certainly, if there's additional feedback, the final reminder then, of course, I just talked about the POC survey, how we would like to hear your feedback. That is another opportunity to share what the frequency or how often you may want to meet. And certainly we'll welcome other feedback if there's other help or support that you need from One Washington. So I'm going to certainly keep the chat open. You're very much welcome to continue to let me know, through the chat, your additional feedback. And then that will be finishing up part 2. So we'll see, John, if you're out of the matrix and back to normal.
So let's do a sound check. Cody or Rob, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? All right, sweet. All right, so we'll proceed. So thank you, Jennifer, for that update. And again, as we try to balance what you need to know versus what you don't really care about, if you see your agency in this list, then we particularly invite you to stay for the next brief segment on technical readiness. But to be clear, anybody, if you're from, it doesn't really matter what agency you're from, if you want to stay and just hear what's going on, you're more than welcome to linger, no problem at all. So with that, I am going to introduce our Chief Technology Officer, Ann Bruner, to speak to us regarding agency system impacts. Ann, are you with us? And if you can hear us, we do not hear you. Are you muted?
Hey, John, this is Cody. I don't see Ann in the participants list.
Okay, so let's check in with Randy Doyle or Lori Jones. Are either of you with us this morning?
No,
Do you see either in the list?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to All right, well, let's do this. I think for the 5 agencies that we listed there, what we'll do is we'll have the technical team do a follow-up with you discreetly, and we can cover at a very, very high level here. Most of all the agencies have been involved in the very first activity there, at least receiving the question, do you have agency system impacts for One Washington? That's been going on for over, I think, since September, October, roughly, of 2018. So it's been going on for a long time that we've been working with agencies to gather the full inventory of systems and interfaces that could potentially be impacted. So as Matthew said, we're in phase 0. That is the research and planning work that has been going on in order to get ready for the readiness phase, or excuse me, the implementation phase. Next up is, with that tech team outreach, is a data analysis meeting. So they'll be doing a deeper dive in those 5 agencies that we listed you specifically. For sure, we'll be hearing from the technical team if you haven't heard from them already. And one of the things, the next highlight there on configuring and changing the current AFERS interface is, if you haven't already heard, there is an effort underway right now, starting out with the State Auditor's Office and the Department of Labor and Industries, to disconnect from an AFERS connected world for the agencies to start getting their data needs met through the information publish and subscribe service, which is already up and running. So those 2 agencies are first, and then all the other agencies, I don't happen to know off the top of my head how many that is or who they are, will quickly be followed up, and furloughs considered, to be sure, between now and the earliest possible date, possibly early first quarter of next year, to be disconnected from the AFERS mainframe world and connecting directly into the information publish and subscribe layer service that OFM offers. So that's about what I know on that, if Randy or Lori hasn't joined us yet. The technical team, as I said, will be doing a specific outreach with those 5 agencies that we listed and are shown there in your deck that you have a copy of. So with that, can you go ahead and flip to the last slide, Cody? Is the last slide?
I think that may be the last slide, John.
All right, so will you scroll back up then, Cody, to one of the slides that just has our email address on it? So I just want to make sure that everybody feels really clear that you have the address to send comments, feedback, questions to for One Washington, and we are happy to receive that. And you should be getting really close to that slide. There it is. All right, so you're probably all familiar with it already, but there it is just in case. And we definitely welcome your feedback. And I want to thank our collaboration partners at Deloitte for their assistance in putting the presentation on for you this morning. As I said, a huge call out to Gwen McClanahan and her team at DES Small Agency Services for their support, collaboration, and results that they continue to deliver, and the advocacy that they do on your behalf. They speak, we try to listen, and so hopefully you're feeling the benefit of the advocacy of your service provider there with DES. And with that, I think that if there's no other comments or questions, then we're going to be able to get you out of here just 5 minutes early. Gwen, do you have any final comments that you'd like to add?
I don't. Well, yes, I do. So the people from DES that are online today, thank you for joining and listening. I think maybe some of you haven't heard the spiel before. It's very interesting. There's a lot of information. So my group, DES, thank you for joining us. I think we actually made up most of your audience.
Exactly. Thank you. So, well, all right. Thank you, everybody, then. And it's been a pleasure. And until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we staying on?